Okay. J'ouvre maintenant.
I'll call the meeting to order now. I already have two persons. Just a moment, please. I just want to say welcome to meeting number 52 of the Standing Committee of the House of Commons on Public Accounts.
16th, we were debating the motion of Madame Sinclair Desgagnés in regard to the contracts by public service and procurement for the supply of COVID-19 vaccines and the amendment of Mr. Housefather, which is now, that amendment now belongs to the committee, because I see Mr. Housefather's not here today, which is fine. When the committee adjourned, I will note that we have House resources until 4:15, and in the order I saw them, I'm going to go to Madame Sinclair Desgagnés and then over to Mr. Fregascato. So, Madame Sinclair Desgagnés, you have the floor.
Merci, Monsieur. Thank you very much, Chair. I would like to begin by simply establishing or going back to the motion that I brought in some days ago, because everybody does agree that it's time to look at this very important motion. What I would like then to do is to give the floor to my Liberal colleagues who have given us notice of their intent to withdraw their motion involving with unanimous consent, and also that there would be a special meeting with the representatives of the pharmaceutical vaccine companies so that they could explain to us why these contracts should not be publicly seen, but should be seen in camera under the circumstances that have been established in my motion. There is absolutely with respect to possible problems with the owners of copyright for these vaccines, they are absolutely not threatened in terms of my motion. I want to rectify that and make that well understood. I want to reiterate here today before in the committee that it's very important that we deal with these commercial agreements, these trade agreements, but within our committee. I give the floor now to my colleague.
The floor.
Merci, Monsieur le Président.
Thank you very much, Chair. In the spirit of cooperation, I would say that I could bring a solution to this debate.
Mr. Chair, for the Liberal side to withdraw its amendment to Ms. Sinclair Desgagnés' motion that we were recently discussing and debating, and that we would meet next week to have suppliers from various pharmaceuticals. I think it's only fair that we invite them to appear, in addition to trade associations that have also expressed concern in written form, as you know, Mr. Chair, to this committee. So I am asking unanimous consent for that.
So, just 1 second. So there are two ways to proceed here. One, in the spirit of good, one is that we, which I think works, a UC motion to. I'm going to break it in two, but I'm going to look for your agreement on this. So this is on the advice of the clerk. We pass quickly a UC motion to withdraw the amendment, and then we return immediately to the date and the witnesses as the next step. That way, it just kind of clears the table, and we reset it, and we deal with that. Is that?
That's in line with
Okay.
what we're hoping for. I decided to bundle
Yeah.
everything up, but if
I
that
just-
makes sense for the clerk,
Yeah.
then I defer to the clerk.
So I'm going to ask for that vote that you see, and then with Mr. McCauley's approval, I'm going to go back to Mr. Fragascatos because he still has the floor. Is that okay? All right, then. I do want to try to just move this along as friendly as we can. So could I look for UC to have the amendment that is attached to the motion withdrawn, please? I'm seeing no opposition to that. I consider that carried. That amendment is now off the table and removed from the committee business. I'm going to make just a brief remark for the records. I am pleased that has happened. Over the recess week, I'd given this a lot of research and a lot of time, and I had come to the conclusion that that amendment was really problematic because it bound members. And I'm saying this not to chastise anyone, but it was just, I want to get this on the record because this might be something that future committees deal with. Based on research that I looked at with the assistance of the clerk, no committee that we could find had ever agreed to a non-disclosure agreement. They've been used for ad hoc committees, and that's either committees have agreed to that or Parliament, and that is outside the scope of Parliament because the privilege just does not apply. And importantly, and the reason for this, my thinking on this, is because this vote was not just a vote that members were taking for themselves. It wouldn't have just impacted them, but for example, if a member had not been here or if a member had voted against this, this vote potentially could have put them in a position where if they were not in agreement, not willing to sign the NDA, they would not have been able to perform their parliamentary duties. They would not have been able to move ahead and conduct the committee business. I made that point quickly when we last met. But I thought about it further. It actually put me in a very tough bind because as committee chair, I would have been bound by the decision of the NDA, the non-disclosure agreement, which is an issue that I had a problem with, which many of you expressed that in this committee, so I won't relitigate it. But potentially, it meant that if the chair had not agreed to the NDA, I would have had to recuse myself, which really would have put the committee in an awkward position. So I'm pleased this has happened. I'm pleased we can move on from this. And on that note, I will turn things back over to Mr. Fragascatos for the next bit. I will try to summarize it because it's looking for a meeting next week or as soon as possible, looking for the 7 manufacturers as well as 2 trade associations. You're welcome to add to that if you like, and after that I'll turn it over to Mr. McCauley.
You've taken the words out of my mouth, Mr. Chair, but that's fine. You have it exactly. I reiterate the point that I made at the outset that on a simple fairness principle that we do allow the various pharmaceutical companies to come and present their perspective, in addition to trade associations that have also shared a view, naturally, as they have with the committee. Then I should add that we would, after we've heard testimony, after the testimony is complete, that we would move to a vote on our colleague's motion. So that's what we have to share on our side.
Thank you. Mr. McCauley.
Thanks for that. I appreciate that. The only thing I would add is I am not keen, frankly, on having trade associations or either chamber here. I just want to have the pharmaceuticals, and I think chat with my colleagues. I think we kind of feel the same, but I would just ask, let's just stick to those. But otherwise, thanks for bringing that forward, Peter.
Thank you, Mr. Desjardins.
It was the same comment as my colleague, Mr. McCauley, here, just in relation to the trade organizations. I think just the pharmaceutical companies is sufficient for the purposes of what we need to do.
And I'll just add to that. I believe the committee members have already received 2 letters that have been translated. A third one is coming, and a fourth one, which has already been received but is being translated, and a fourth one is expected. So I raise this not to say these letters aren't welcome, but it does open up a bit of a concern that I don't think we're suggesting that anyone that writes a letter should be in a position to come to that meeting. We do have their written testimony, but I just want to flag that it doesn't just end with the first 2 we've received, but others are coming as well. and I think I can say this I'm not breaking any confidence. The contact I had today was looking to offer another opinion, the case for disclosure. So it might be best to focus on the pharmaceuticals, but of course that is a question for the committee. So I believe back to you, Mr. Fragaskatos.
I have no view. If that's the will of our colleagues, then we're not going to fight that point.
Okay, so that seems to be resolved. Thank you. Can we talk about the date? And I'd be curious to get. I'm sorry, you're up. Go ahead.
No, I was just going to start the discussion on a date, but you go ahead.
Just pause for a second. Yeah, that's yeah. So the proposal from the government bench is next week, which of course is a recess week. Note I didn't call it a break week because we're all going to be home in our ridings working exceptionally hard. And so I want to talk to you. I mean, we can endeavor to try to put a meeting together. I'd say the earliest would be a week from now, or a week tomorrow. I want you to think about what is fair to notify. And I also, sorry, there's another question as well. I think what is a fair notify? We also need to talk about who are we inviting. We don't just want, obviously, the communications person coming in. I would think that we would want the country representative for each of these pharmaceuticals coming in. We want, this committee hears from senior mandarins, top officials, so some thought has to be given into who, in fact, are we inviting to come in to address this. Is it the country representative? Is it, for heaven's sake, I hope it's not someone from their law department, the legal department, because we will never get through this this committee work. So give that some thought. My recommendation is we maintain the status we have, which is to ask for a very senior executive. But back to the timing, I think the week is the soonest, and not to disagree with my colleague, we do have the calendar open on March 23rd, which is 2 weeks, which would give sufficient time for notification. It would give sufficient time to have people make travel arrangements to come in if they choose, or for the clerk to send out the headset if people don't come in here, because we do want to take that responsibility seriously. So I throw that back to the members, both the date and then the officials. And Mr. Fragaskatos first, and then Garn. But hold it, Mr. McCauley, you weren't in the queue where, yeah, that's what I thought. Mr. Fragaskatos, then Mr. Genuis.
I suggested next week. I could also phrased it as at the earliest opportunity. We don't want to play games with it. Let's meet when our clerk can book the times for the companies to come.
Avant, c'est Mr. Genuis.
Before, Mr. Genuis?
Of the two of you, was it 50-50? Okay, so Mr. Genuis, you're first.
Yeah, I agree next week. I agree senior people, and let's just trust the chair to have latitude in terms of the specific names, so that we don't have to come back and mechanically go through it piece by piece. Chair the most senior people using your good judgment, and let's do it next week.
Madame Sinclair Desgagnés.
Madame Gagné? In the spirit of the rationale that we have before us, in that we want to give the pharmaceutical companies the opportunity to express themselves. And we want a senior representative, but they could choose that representative. We want to have a message that what we are seeking is an important issue, and if it's a legal issue, that could be debated as well. But really, we want to be able to deal with that. So I only want to point out that I would prefer as soon as possible. That being said, next week. But if it is the wish of the committee to have it March 23rd, I accede. Thank you very much.
Yeah, just to add some comment on two things. One, the date. Just to begin, I think, I could trust the chair and the clerk to find a suitable time for us. Sooner the better, though I agree with my colleague from the bloc I do also think that in the presence of the members who will be invited from these said companies, I think it might also be important, considering the nature of their attendance, that we as well invite the parliamentary law clerk. It could be of our benefit as a committee to have them as a present witness as well, in order for us to better understand the circumstances to which these companies may provide information, or lack thereof, to which we may have some advice.
Thank you. Mr. McCauley.
Thanks, Chair. No, I echo Mr. Desjardins' comment that we should maybe have law clerk here just to avoid a he said, she said, and a delay of things, so we can settle it all in one day. Next week is wonderful. I would just ask either Thursday afternoon if some of us out west are catching the red eye in so we can get a bit of sleep, or earlier Friday so those of us out west can actually get out at a decent hour.
Next week's a recess week, yeah. Yeah, okay. Anyone on this side? I guess in specific to the law clerk, if you could
Yeah, sure.
respond to that.
I've done a lot of talking. I don't know if my colleagues have a view on it, but I see no obvious issue with what Mr. Desjardins has suggested with respect to the law clerk appearing.
I'm just going to ask the clerk, would you think that will be an issue, inviting the parliamentary law clerk?
No, I will ask him.
Okay. Very good.
Sure, I apologize. One other thing I was going to mention is if we could strongly, if we're able to pull it all together, to strongly request that the folks on the pharmaceuticals be here in person.
So,
I realize the difficulty,
Yeah.
however, it is just
Well, no,
so much more
it's-
conducive to.
yeah, I mean, that's my default, but of course, the standing orders give the individuals the ability to choose, but folks witnesses are encouraged to attend in person. I've been doing that and will continue to do that, but the clerk will tell you I've asked them to go to the limit of that already in every meeting, and I can't go any further. So it's yeah. So all right, any other comments? So yes, Mr. Desjardins.
Just in comment to Mr. McCauley's point about being in person, I think, just to put in your reference, Mr. Chair, what my preference would be, and I think the preference of some of my colleagues, for and making sure that we have their presence in person. If they, in fact, because I do know that it's going to be difficult for the clerk and for the chair to find a suitable time for this to happen next week. If they can't be present in person next week, I think I am of the position that if they offer another date that is in person, that I would accept that date in favor of them appearing virtually next week. Do you know what I'm saying?
Well, you've hit the conundrum. So
Oh.
that's why I think 2 weeks gives people to clear their calendar and get here. 1 week less so, and so you're kind of in the same party I am. You want to have your cake and eat it too. So on that we're ideological soulmates. But Mr. Desjardins, the challenge is that at the end of the day, if a witness wants to appear virtually, there's nothing that this committee can do Mr. McCauley.
Thanks, Chair, and I appreciate that, and it's difficult because we're going to have maybe 4 or 5. But that being said, if they've managed in the short time that the motion's been in front of us to gather enough pressure to have so many letters from high level to chamber that written, I'm sure if it's that important to them, they can do that. I'm sure it's important they can get themselves here by this week.
I'll overlook the obvious,
But I'll leave
obvious
it to
speculation. My goal, and I think our goal, is to ensure we have people here that can speak to these issues, and not that they just kind of send someone in who meets a deadline that is early and attractive. I will say this: and I'll consult with the clerk after this. The absolute earliest I would want to do this is a week tomorrow, the 17th. But I'm going to consult with the clerk, and I'll ask you to kind of, unless you all direct us to action this next Friday, I'm going to talk to the clerk about just some of the logistics and discuss determine either the 17th or the 23rd. Yes, please.
I must object to the 17th. I'm sorry, clerk. March 17th. Come on, have a heart. St. Patrick's Day.
Wow.
But seriously, we're...
You can do Saturday. You'll feel twice as bad.
Yeah, I've offered in the past to work weekends, but apparently that doesn't happen. But Zoom, c'est sûr que...
It's certain that we are very open and very available. I think that it's really a matter of the communications that you will be able to have with others. There is a general will around the table to accommodate the witnesses and also the needs of the committee so that they may appear in person if possible. Very well.
Any other comments? If not, I'm going to summarize where I think we're at. We're going to, which I'll do that right away anyway, then you can comment. We're going to invite the 7 pharmaceutical companies with an emphasis that they appear in person, but recognizing that your chair is restrained by the standing orders. We'll also include the parliamentary law clerk, the interim law clerk, who will be here as well. I am going to consult with the clerk and either set the date for the end of next week or the Thursday 2 weeks from today. And we will proceed as we normally proceed in this meeting. There'll be a opening statement from each of the witnesses, and then we will turn to committee business. Does that sound a good summary of what we're at? And if so, you can send me on my way. But first, I'll turn to the motion sponsor.
Thank you very much. Just to note that it might be wise to provide more time for that meeting. It might be longer than 2 hours because you do have 7 representatives that are going to be traveling here, we hope. So it has to be long enough to accommodate our inquiry and what they have to say. So I'd say certainly 3, if not 4 hours. And also a quarter of an hour to vote.
I'm going to take what we've agreed to and put that in my pocket, and now you can talk about the time. 2 hours, 3 hours. I'm sure government members will have something to say about this and perhaps others, but the request is we attempt to have a 2 to 3 hour long meeting. I'm just going to consult with the clerk on this before I seek your opinion to make sure that this is even possible. Hold on. So it is possible if we want to do that. Mr. Regascatos, go ahead.
In principle, we're not opposed to more time, but I think that we can also get the meeting done in the usual time frame. But I mean, if more time is needed, then I suppose we can reserve that right. Of course, all of this depends on availability, right? Resources of the House of Commons, which are completely out of our hands. You know, that's I think everybody's being cooperative, so we'll keep working together on it. Something like that. Yeah. Right. Mr. McCauley just said 3 hours if needed, but not necessarily 3 hours. It's a play off of. Yeah, it's a famous Mackenzie King line, I think, right? Anyway, we don't have to get into that.
Yes.
But
I'm seeing kind of head nods on this side, but I just want to confirm that's okay. All right. Then what I'll do, I'll set the meeting up. So after, and again, I'll seek your approval to do this at the 2 hour mark. If there are still questions, we can either continue with rounds or members can defer to those that still have questions. But so that way we'll just continue this this process. All right. Could I have an agreement to adjourn the meeting, please? No. Oh, hold on. No, actually, hold on. No, actually, before that, hold on. We're going to look at budgets. Hold on a second. Okay. Could I please get your agreement? These have been sent to you. You might not have them in front of you. These are just our requests for budgets. I'll read them out, or that the clerk could send them. In the meantime, I'll just read them out. It's end of year, and our clerk has been very persistent and persuasive to get these done, but look, the optimism even beaten out of me. We're prepared here. Do you want to send them out, clerk? So they just went out. Could I get your approval for $1,100 for headsets, dial-in phone lines, and a working meal? Sorry, I don't have my notes in front of me. For a meeting on Report 4, Systemic Barriers, Corrections Service Canada, the 2022 Report 104, the Auditor General of Canada. Could I have your support to pass this? Yes. Mr. Clerk, that one is passed. Next, for $1,625, again, to cover the same items for Report 7. This is upcoming. Cybersecurity of personal information in the cloud of the 2020 reports 5 data to the Auditor General of Canada. Could I have your approval for that, please? Good. Thank you. Report 9, COVID-19 vaccines of the 2022 Report 9 of the 10 of the Auditor General of Canada. Amount requested $1,100 for the same items. Could I have your approval for this budget, please? Yes, thank you. That's okay, Clerk. No, that was not a. We're trying to be efficient here. Finally, Report 10, specific COVID-19 benefits of 2022 Report 9 and 10 of the Auditor General of Canada for $2,375. Again, this was 2 meetings, hence the amount is higher. But again, for the same items, dial-in phone lines, headset, and working meals. Could I have your approval for this, please? Thank you. The clerk is very happy. Now, I'm going to try to explain this to keep members, opposition members, aware that I'm not pulling a fast one. I'm going to adjourn the meeting. It does not, because we have an upcoming meeting on March the 20th with the Minister of Indigenous Services. I need to adjourn this meeting so I can roll that meeting in. But the schedule is now set, and we will have this this meeting either the end of next week or the 23rd. Nothing's going to derail that, Madame St. Clair. The committee has agreement, so I can safely adjourn this meeting, and we will come back to this issue as I outlined earlier today. Do I have agreement? Pardon, encore?
We'll be able to vote at that meeting. That's all I want to know. Thank you.